Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and with me is our program founder, Jussara Korngold. I know, Jussara, this is the work of a tribe, right? There's so many of us that are working together, especially under the guidance of our wonderful Joanna de Angelis and also Divaldo Pereira Franco, who are helping us guide through those conversations. It is so good to be here. And I love the opportunity, Josara, to be here with you to talk about psychology and spirituality. I wanted to say that today I would like for us to really zoom in it's almost like a cliche, right? But the idea that what happens to you, to me, when we just keep sweeping the dirt under the rug and never clean it up, metaphorically speaking, right? And before we dive into that, that's the frontal concept that we want to talk today. I want to say, Josada, that I came across an old novel. I know you know quite well, but if you who are here in our discussion today may not remember completely, I'd like to talk about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So this a novel written by Robert Louis Stevenson highlighted the sense of duality in human nature overall, and wanted to say that, well, first and foremost, he wrote that in 1885, right? And it was first published actually a year later in 1886. And the story, just to get us in the same path of thought process as Josara, the story is about this doctor, quite respected Dr. Henry Jekyll. And so you start to think in terms of the thought that comes to my mind, Josara, is a very strong ego, right? He's very, has a great reputation, a very respected doctor. And he comes across the opportunity to create a potion that actually, when he drinks it, transforms him into a completely different person. And that person, Mr. Hyde, Mr. Edward Hyde, we can call it very cruel, right? And by the context of the time, lacking the moral of the same Dr. Jekyll. And as Mr. Hyde, Dr. Jekyll acts out all of his darker impulses without even blinking an eye. There is no sense of consequence, right? But he's putting everything that is somehow swept under the rug, we can say, and those impulses are acted. But over time, that transformation from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde is no longer as controllable as it was at the beginning of the narrative. So the if we were to do a summary, a quick summary of the book, would say that it is this whole event and unwarranted transformation of Mr. Jekyll is narrated to us, the reader, through the perspective of his friend, his lawyer, who's a friend, and he starts to investigate what's going on, and eventually it brings to the forefront that those two individuals, as disparate as they are the same person, and of course now it is this a discussion no longer about the potion and changing behavior, but it's really how do we struggle with the duality in one's identity that can lead, in his case, to very tragic outcomes. So some people call it good versus evil. Some other just call about the complexity of our humanity, just out our human psyche, right? And of course, ultimately, some people say, well, it's all about the dangers at a very surface level of unchecked scientific experimentation. But I just thought that, can we talk a little bit about some of the ideas that Stevenson brings to us and how it marries the some of the very interesting concepts that Joanna de Angelis brings to us about the totality, duality, and our what we some of the elements that we struggle with. What do you think?
Well, first of all, hello everyone. Whatever you are, I hope you are having a great day, and this is going to be even better now that we are all together. Thank you, Marcia, for all this introduction. That it's absolutely amazing, and as uh, as we think about things and someone start displaying it like you were explaining it now, there was so many new things that start popping on my mind.
Yeah.
First of all, was the time frame for all these ideas. That the book by Dr. Stevenson that came at the in the late 19th century,
Yeah.
which was exactly when everything about psychology, the psychiatry started taking shape, and so we see when the truth is about to be revealed, it comes in different forms, in different places, right? And here we have this case, a book, literature that is going to enlighten so much in relation to us, ourselves. And what is amazing is that, when this topic of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is actually mentioned by the benefactor, the Joanna de Angelis, in her book In Search of
Mm.
Truth, that
Mm-hmm.
written through, Divaldo Pereira Franco. And in chapter 1, the human being in its totality, when she's talking about, the different structures about us, as, in our first stages of life, as much as we started developing in terms of, our physiology, the physical organism, and it
Mm-hmm.
went through millions and millions of years of perfecting this machine that somehow many times we take it for granted, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So much, right? From it, and we think that it's never going to break, and it's not something that I can go to the store and just replace it, right? Maybe one day, but not now. We know this in the spiritism and the spiritualism as being reincarnation. You need a new body, but then that is going to be a whole new process. So she talks about it, but then she comes to this point of the bipolar structure of the human being. And bipolar here, she's not talking about the pathology, right? That is a diagnosis from the psychiatric field, but she's talking about us in terms of our duality. And then it is when she mentions this book along her explanations in how we little by little get into the whole this process of evolvement. We go into the evolvement of our conscious as well. We started with the basic instincts, and then it started as expressing emotions, communication through through verbal communication, written communication. Then we go to the phase where we're going to get so many achievements, and achievements like we have today in terms of technology, medicine, all those things. But then it comes to the point where she goes into what we truly are, which is not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily this material body. It is this, the soul, the mortal spirit, and how we act in the world. And what is the story that is behind this spirit that has been living and experienced things from millennia? And that she mentions Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as a perfect example in terms of this inner conflict that we go through in terms of ego versus self. And by the way, I love that Stevenson called Mr. Hyde, because it's exactly the hidden part of ourselves. I don't think it was just a coincidence that he named it Hyde. Hyde, right? Although it's with a Y instead of an I, but it's the same thing. It is someone that somehow we don't know. It is hidden in ourselves, being the sum up of so many differences, different excursions that we had through life, but not necessarily now being in total control or knowledge. What do you think about it, Marcia?
I love it, right? And just if you don't mind, going back to what you said, right? Which is the idea, because it's to me, my very linear way of thinking, it's always good to have that sense of history. So number one, the historical reference of the evolution of mankind, this machine, as you said, and it's so important to understand that. And we may think, why aren't we, quote unquote, created perfect, right, Jussara? And just in that question, we can spend hours and hours talking about it itself. But the notion of time to evolve as a human race and as a human being. So the collective and the individual, how important it is, and how, as you mentioned, we go in order to achieve that psychological maturity, that sense of more of the totality that we're discussing here, right? We need to confront first and foremost our vulnerability, our immaturity, our still imperfect body and mind, and quite frankly spirit, so that we can achieve that sense of what we call, which is the one of the books by Joanna de Angelis, the integral human being, the title of the second book in her series, right? The integral human being, which to me brings such a notion of totality, of understanding and harmonizing who we are, and as evidence in this book, how could we reconcile the aspects that we so try to hide, as you said, right? Mr. Hyde is an awesome name that was chosen. How do we reconcile the things that we hide deeply, right, Jusada? And how it is important to do the opposite, to actually bring our ignorance, our lack of awareness, our lack of morality, we could even say, our lack of intelligence, whatever that may be, that is our true north, where we want to be. Let's bring where we are so that we can better become what we can be. Does it
There,
make sense what I'm saying?
yeah, there are so many things that we can learn from the story and that
Yeah.
apply to us. One of
Hmm.
the things that we always be getting back to
Yeah.
is this process is not possible without self knowledge.
Yes.
So we can resist as much as we want, but until we really embrace this process, we will be in this kind of confrontation, in this inner conflict, right? Uh,
Hmm.
it's easy to understand. First of all, I mean, going with the flow of the book,
Hmm.
how excited and curious Dr. Jekyll was in terms of his new discovery, being capable of somehow accessing his inner feelings and the self per se, right? Because the ego being what we remember, the rules of society, the reflection of the times, the era that we are living.
Yeah.
There was a whole new world that was coexisting with him that he
Hmm.
was not that he did not have any knowledge before, but
Yeah.
it was him. But it was not that him that he was portraying, but it was something more. And so
Hmm.
one of the things is, for us to have this idea, this knowledge and understanding, that even
Hmm.
to ourselves, if it is hard for others to know ourselves, it is even harder, I think, for us to know ourselves. So there
Yeah.
is whole part, and Joanna de Angelis mentions, for instance, that famous image of the iceberg. You see the
Yeah.
tip of the iceberg, but we are not only that, and actually that doesn't represent that much. So now,
Hmm.
what is going to be the process that is going to allow me to get, to know the greater part of myself. And of
Hmm.
course, when I start digging deeper, there will
Hmm.
be sides and aspects of me that I will be a surprise to the
Yes.
way I'm I was brought up in this incarnation, and how society lives, like to say. But there is only this form to understand. And so in this case, where we see Mr. Hyde showing, much more reassurance, because he has so much more information than Dr. Jekyll, right?
Yeah.
He contains much more. And the fact that, and normally this is also associated with the concept of the shadows, which is
Yes.
the part that we hide or repress. And over and over, I've been hearing the experts, because I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I've been studying Joanna de Angelis for over 3 decades, but I do not have a degree on that. But we hear the experts saying that the shadow, just because it's called the shadow, not necessarily means something dark, something
Yeah.
ugly. It
Can
means,
I, yeah, when you have a chance, I'd love to add a different nuance to
yes.
the concept that you're bringing. But go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. No, no, go ahead. You can do it now.
No, it's because it's important for us to talk about self-awareness, self-knowledge, and the confrontation of the so-called shadow. And so I love that you're about to talk about the shadow. To us is darkness or lack of visibility, right? We don't see, and many of us believe the shadow is all the bad stuff, but it's not, as you're about to say. So one of the things that I wanted to maybe introduce here, Josada, is, and this is a model developed by two psychologists,
Mhm.
Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham, and this is mid 1900s, so 1950, 55. They developed this model that is really well utilized by uh, human resources organizations, right?
Mhm.
And why do they use it? Because it's easier to understand than the notion of even the iceberg that you were talking about, the idea of conscious and unconscious. What's above the surface is conscious, what's not. But then it's much harder to really dive into all that permeates into that. But the model, and it's portrayed academically as if it was we were people, all of us, divided into four quadrants. Okay, and those four quadrants, this is the concept of Johari window. Just I don't know if you read about it, but it's a window, so it's four panes in a window, and it really helps us understand ourselves and how to become better at respecting the other when the other is not even aware of certain flaws. So it's awesome from an HR function used to give feedback, right? But just to add to this discussion about self-awareness and looking and bringing light to the shadow, in the model, Johari Windows model, there are four areas. And if you look into the top left, this is what is known to yourself and known to others. We can call it the public persona, right? And it's what perhaps mm, uh, Dr. Jekyll wanted to be seen, right? As a doctor who with the uh, all the knowledge, etc., etc. Then, if you go to the right of the same axis, you actually see the blind spot. And blind spot is I don't know this about myself, but others can see, right? So maybe you start to see it somebody that is repressing. I don't know. Let's get something easy, right? Repressing the idea of intolerance, right? And but everybody can see that that person is really intolerant herself himself, therefore this is a blind spot for this person. On the lower left, we have what we call the hidden area or facade, which is the area that you are, but you really guard against that people to know who you are. An example that is very benign is I may be, let's say, my profession requires that I am very organized, right? I'm a project manager, so I have to be very organized. But unbeknownst to most people, I am the sloppiest, the most disorganized person in the world, and I try to not show that to people. Just as an example, so it's my hidden uh, area, and finally that unknown, which is really the deep unconscious, right? It's you don't know and people don't know about you, but it's part of who you are. So I think it's super cool to start to also break down the topic of self-awareness when we start to look at uh, you, Jussara, may see me, Marcia, and see some things that it's I'm blind to it. So with respect and honor, you can come to me and say, Marcia, you need to know about this, right? So that's the feedback that professional companies are using. But I, on the other hand, may come to you, Jusara, and out of my incredible trust and courage, come to you saying, Josiah, I want to open up about something that I don't trust other people to be aware about myself. So I love that the model Johari window because it gives yet another dimension about the search about our own truth, right?
Yeah, that really comes directly in what we are talking in terms of
Yeah.
understanding the complexity of all of this. Uh,
Hmm.
that's why, in one way, we are not going to be achieving this opportunity of removing this thing of removing the conflict between ego and self overnight.
Hmm. Hmm.
Process that is going to take millennia. It's interesting how Joanna de Angelis, even when she's talking about this whole process of, this confrontation of understanding, that there are
Hmm.
sides in you,
Hmm.
and that you ignored somehow, or things that will just come. Of course, most of the time we just focus on the negative, but it doesn't need to be negative. Like, let's say that we have a person that is very shy,
Yeah.
uh, and all of a sudden a situation rises where someone has to take a stand, and
Yeah.
this person starts, uh, taking the podium and doing something that even the person didn't know he or she was capable of doing that. So we have several examples that we could think about. This other side, the other side of the moon of ourselves, right? The other side
Yeah.
of Jusara that I don't know. And when
Yeah.
she talks about here, and as being an essential part of this process of self knowledge, self
Hmm.
awareness, is self love.
Beautiful, beautifully said. Yeah.
And um, and because when we start getting in touch with ourselves, then she says it's not about just accepting all our weaknesses, but being aware of them and working on them, and not becoming extremely strict in our way of in judging ourselves and seeing things. But
Mhm.
and then she goes and she mentions something that I thought it was extraordinary, because
Uh,
it says that we have a way of tricking ourselves into believing that we do have love, but it's still we are not capable of self-loving. And
yeah.
so a way that the shadow, right, or let's say can do is disguise
Yes.
within ourselves
Mhm.
love in the form of I love others.
Yes.
So love
Yes.
there. I have love. So I have love for others. But then at the when you do analyze, this is just a disguise of the sad a shadow saying to yourself, no, you do have love. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
To refrain us from the process of self-loving. So you
Yeah.
see how trick this is, and how hard it is for us to get in touch. She even mentioned an example like maybe some of you went through that already. That when you go and start praying, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden you start praying, you start having lift thoughts, and all those beautiful images and words and everything, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden there are inadequate thoughts that
Yeah.
try to invade your mind.
Yeah.
Things that normally you are completely in contradiction with prayer, with highly
Mhm.
pointed commuting with the
Yeah.
on high. And she says, do you know what is happening when you're doing that? And why do you feel this when you are praying? It
Yeah.
is because somehow the self didn't like that you start shaking things up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just go there and send the opposite response of what
Yeah.
you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's hard, right?
Yeah. I one thing that came to my mind, because we're talking here about what I call very courageous, right? The courage. It's a courageous process. You need to have the courage to confront what you hide from yourself.
Mhm.
So the idea of hiding yourself consciously or not, right? So a shadow is usually an unconscious defense mechanism because you need that to defend against a perceived or real threat. And you do that, you build that illusion, that persona, that mask to protect yourself. And now you start to repress because the mask is to be what you're not. You repress what is hidden or from you, right? So one of the things that you alluded to, and of course Joanna in her book In Search of Truth brilliantly writes about it, is the notion of shadow work, right, Josada? And one of the things that came to my mind, I don't know if you're familiar, but it's the idea of shadow work and the myth of Pan, right? Have you read anything about it?
Not so much.
Okay, so first of all, who is if we think in terms for us, the myth of Pan and the shadow work are interesting because they both the myth and the work to know yourself through shadow work explore the aspects of our human psyche and our experience when we are looking into a relationship with our unconscious, right? So back to um, the potion with Dr. Jekyll, right? He only allowed that potion allowed to express through the very dark Mr. Hyde because the darker impulses were there, right, Josada? So if he never had that, a Mr. Hyde would not come out as cruel as he was in the book. So the idea here is that we all have the shadow, positive or not, but we have something that we are unaware. And when we do shadow work, we start to bring to light, right? We start to look into it. That's the goal, everyone. This is the goal, is to look at everything that we somehow repress. We repress because of the context that we're living, our society, our family, etc., etc. So it may be our fragility, our weaknesses, our, I don't know, our desires, right? Anything that, in order for us to be accepted, to belong, we judge that those are not good enough, so we hide. And some hidden, just as a way of giving additional examples, could be I'm an angry person, right, Josara? I don't know. I can, well, as I say this, I can think of many people that I know that are angry people. No matter what happens, if something little happens, it strikes that anger response. And so at some point through, I don't know, anger management classes, etc., this person start to repress or suppress that anger. Another aspect, which is we talked many times from an emotional landscape, fear, shame, whatever we all bring, and sometimes we try to repress. So back to the myth of Pan. Pan is the god of the wild, right? The nature, shepherds, and flocks. And the figure of this myth is he's a half man, half goat, right? So, with this, the myth is all about the notion of us, human beings, and how we embody our very animal, primal instinctive nature, right? So it's all of that is really untamed, or I don't know, unchecked forces within ourselves. And like Mr. Hyde, so there is no filter, there is a abandonment into those desires, those forces that come from within. So he represents joy and chaos in the world and within ourselves. But when we talk about shadow work and the myth of Pan, is that at some point he believes there's nothing wrong with him. And I think this is where um, just that we need to be cautiously aware that for us to grow, to evolve, we must have the courage, as I said before, but also it's almost like a sense of betrayal that I'm betraying what I worked so hard to contain. What are your thoughts into that idea of instead of repressing, containing, having the courage to surface, accept, and that idea of self love that you mentioned, right? So that when you accept and you love, you now are able to become what you really are without having to lie about your true nature. What?
I think that
Mm,
the whole process, it's
mhm,
a calling to self awareness, uh,
yeah.
inviting us not to be just the
Mhm,
spectators of life, of
yeah.
our lives. And sometimes, we position our life in a way that it seems that we do not have responsibility for what is happening to us. And
Yeah.
I think it's very important, especially when we are studying about spiritual values, and we see in terms in his spirits is so clear when Alan Kardec bring this concept of obsession or spiritual attachment in
Mhm.
the Medium's book, where
Mhm.
sometimes, if you have this kind of knowledge or understanding of,
Mhm.
the afterlife and the influence of spirits in your life,
Mhm.
you can think that, it's not my responsibility. Or like we had in Christianity, it is
Mhm.
one that is doing is acting upon me. Rarely
Mhm.
we see manifestations of the saints. Of course, sometimes, with people like Mother Teresa will say, well, she is the reflection and the representation, and probably she is inspired and guided by an angel.
Yeah.
Most of us, we are inspired and guided by demons. And sometimes we position ourselves in this way, I think, and like you said, it doesn't mean coming into terms with what I am if I still think that I'm not in control. And so
Yeah.
that imagery that we have of the little angel and in one side and the devil at the other side, and
Mhm.
they're kind of, it's like a competition who is going
Yeah.
to win. And sometimes, even if the good forces win, you may not feel the merit entirely on yourself, because it seems
Yeah.
that it was all inspired by a third part party, which is not you. And
Mhm.
so now, with all the spiritual understanding, and actually with psychology, because here is what the experts are telling us: listen,
Mhm.
there's more into you, and don't blame it on the strange, whether it's a friend that is inducing you to a certain
Yes.
type of behavior, or a spiritual attachment that you may have, but it's you. It's sometimes within yourself, it is present in you. And unless you face it, there is no way you are going to come into terms with that. And
Mhm.
the whole point of Joanna de Angelis in this chapter, especially when she talks about the self love, is
Yeah.
exactly that. Listen, of course, you are going to be seeing ugly things,
Yeah.
because there is one thing that we normally say: if you don't like that much your version in this incarnation, I can guarantee to you that the other ones were worse. Very
Yeah.
like technology, right?
Yeah. 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 Love it. Love it. Yeah.
On progressing from model to model, right?
Yeah.
So there's no way, I mean, with rare exceptions, that you will say, oh, that old thing was better than the new thing now, right? So
Yeah.
this is what happened, and here is what she's proposing to us. It
Mhm.
is there, it will come to surface. There is no way repression is going to work. It's just going to aggravate the situation. It's very much like you said at the beginning, Marcia. It's just sweeping the dirt under the rug, never cleaning up. One day, all that dust is going to appear somehow, and you have to deal with that. So
Yeah.
so much easier if we acknowledge ourselves as being an immortal being, and okay, I have weaknesses, I have virtues, I have good things that I'm proud of, others
Yeah.
not so much, but I'm not going to avoid seeing who I am
Yeah.
and finding ways to come into terms with that. And the way that she presents that in the chapter is beautiful. Is
Yeah.
and she presents that famous statement by Paul when she says, "It's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me," meaning Christ, not the person,
Mhm.
right? But the model, the example. So before, I was someone that was not in balance with myself. right now, if I think about harmony, if I
Yeah.
think about ultimate love and compassion and charity and knowledge and understanding and all that, we think about, a model like Jesus, like Christ. And this
Yes.
is what it happens here when it's not about obliterating one or the other, but when the two of them are in perfect harmony, right?
Yes, yes. And I know we're coming to the end here, but I wanted to say that one of the things that came to my mind was a class. It's a very interesting and quite uh, prevalent in many of spiritist centers and groups to study what it's usually called inner transformation, right? And in that course, and oh my goodness, I've first time that I took the class, it was I don't know, about 40 years ago. So right. And at the time, it was this idea, it contained the idea that you needed to look at yourself, highlight uh, all your qualities, right? Your virtues, if you will, and also make an inventory of all your imperfections, your defects,
Mhm.
right? The things that are actually wrong, including addictions or addictive behaviors in that. And then you go day by day trying to remove what's a defect and what is an addiction, et cetera, and really focus on becoming pure quality. Um, and then we come to study, read, be really taken by the thoughts that Joanna de Angelis brings to us in her whole psychology collection. You then immediately come to terms with the idea that inner transformation, it's all about not repressing, but it's the process of self-discovery, of looking at yourself and with love and compassion, just like back to that concept of Johari's window, Jussara, when let's say either the two of the quadrants, either the one that you try the um, uh, blind spot, right, where you see that I have a blind spot, and with respect and care and compassion, you come to me and you see, Marcia, if you were to have the courage and the time and the desire to look into that, you'd be a better person, right?
Mhm.
And so should we, as we look at some things that were hidden to us from ourselves, the same way as if it is a hidden area, that we start to be courageous enough to say, I'm going to bring up to the world this aspect of who I am, because that's who I am. I can no longer stay living a lie because all we need to truly get to a point of self love is living a life of authenticity. And I guess the overall message that I see from today's discussion is the message that we really need to not only embrace who we are, right, but to understand that there will always be those conflicting aspects. Um, I think just to finalize, and I would like to hear from you as well if you have any final thoughts, Josada. But we are reminded that Joanna de Angelis cautions us that overarchingly, right? This is a very broad statement that in religious movement, any religious movement, if the goal of that movement, that church, that sacred text is to understand all the conflicts that we bring within ourselves and to overcoming them. It is really important for us to go back to what you mentioned before, Jusada, which is to consider the little angel and the little demon, uh, that figure that we see in comics and little different children's stories, etc. But they do exist, and they are sides of who we are. So it simply underlies or highlights the fact that we, as we are today, all of us, you, me, all of us here, have this inherent duality that is within us, and all that we're trying to understand is to reach a sense of balance, a sense of equilibrium, right? Because when we recognize that duality does exist within us, it's very much a present and very strong force within our psyche, then we are able to achieve that sense of, I don't know, harmony, integrity, balance. And those aspects of our personality will lead to psychological maturity, to emotional and spiritual achievement. What are your thoughts, Josada?
Yeah, I was thinking in a way of simplifying all that. Remembering about, a very good friend of mine, Dr. Dacio Yandoli, and
Mm,
he has a way of presenting this imagery to us that it can be an exercise to ourselves
mhm,
in terms of
mhm,
being, oh, like you say, when you do a self-assessment,
mhm.
uh, you will definitely see what are the points that I still need to work on.
Yeah.
So the way he presents that is, let us imagine that we have a next number of little cups, okay, and those little cups, each one of them represents one of the virtues or you want to achieve, of the good things we want to achieve, right? And so you name them. So I want to be humbler, then
Mhm.
work more on my humility. So if I look at that cup, for the moment it is basically empty, right? So my task is I have to fill up this cup,
I
because
love it. Yeah.
this cup is not filled, I'm presenting in myself, in my behavior, exactly the opposite of
Mhm.
what I want to achieve. So I want to achieve humility. The cup is basically empty. So now I'm presenting in myself more, selfishness, arrogance, things like this. So we can ask ourselves, what little cup do I need to fill this week? Which one?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
more in need of my attention right now. And like Divaldo Franco says, it is not about repressing or trying to push away, because the space, if we push away, the space is still needs something like this empty cup. It
Yeah.
still requires water to fill it up.
Mhm.
So if I just push away, it's going to still be there. The only way for me to change it is to put the opposite emotion. So
Yeah.
there is a negative emotion. I need to replace it, not just push it away, ignore it, hide it, and become a Mr. Hyde, right? And all of a sudden, Dr. Jekyll here is, oh my God, what is happening to me? who is this person that I'm becoming? There must be a possession or something. No, yes, it's the possession of you yourself that has been hidden for so many times. So let's go with that. Let's think about, a little cup that you need to fill this week, and maybe the cup of, being more charitable. It can be the cup of being more attentive to the needs of others. It can be
Mhm,
up of becoming less proud, less pride, the pride in the negative sense, where
mhm.
that we are better than everyone else. So all of those things, and ultimately we are all going to get there. It depends on us, it depends on our effort, and this integration is going to happen. So the sooner we start becoming aware and doing something about it, the sooner we will see ourselves living in this kind of balance that we so much wanted to happen.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words to all of us, right? Let us imagine the empty or not so empty cups of where we want to be. And I just want to say we are at time. And I want to say if this is the first time that you are here to listen to our discussion, our program, please take a moment to notice that the Psychology and Spirituality weekly talks are based on works, as it was probably abundantly clear today, but the works by Joanna de Angelis. And we're here to offer the space that we can confront, compare, correlate, go against each other, right, Jussara? We are here to just really talk about some concepts so that we can expand our concepts of spirituality from a psychological lens and be able to potentially, perhaps, lead a better life. We want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association. I hope to see you back during our next episode when we'll continue this interesting discussion about the search of our truth. Thank you, everyone, and see you later.